Oh, can I sit there? Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's lovely to be here in Holland. Lovely to see Rabbi Jacobs and family Katzman. I have two surprises for you this afternoon, which was also a surprise for me as well. The first is that Baruch Hashem, this Pesach, I actually received the first copy of a new book which I wrote. So I'm going to officially make a book launch over here, because this is the first occasion that I've had to make a book launch. It's called The Basics of Chassidus. It's 502 pages long, so I don't expect you all to read it quickly. But the other mazel tov is that this magnum opus had a baby, which is this book. It's much easier. It's called Soul Talk. And we gave this out for like Oma, which is actually a précis of this one over here. So I'm going to leave a few copies over here with the Katzmans, and perhaps you can avail yourself of them. Why did I write this book, and what's inside it? I felt there was a need to have in one place, one book, a digest of the history of Chabad. People are familiar with what Chabad does, but not everybody is familiar with what Chabad is. What is the philosophy of Chabad? And I wanted to start at the very beginning, the fundamentals of Torah. What is Torah? What is it? What is Jewish mysticism? What is it? What is the history of it? And finally, after the history of it, most important, its application today. And I'm going to share with you today, as a part of the launch, a very special chapter in the book. And that's why I call this particular talk a journey through the orchard. I'm going to share with you this talk of the Rebbe. It's called Kuntras Inyona Shel Torah Chassidus. Translated, that means on the essence of Chassidus. It's one of the chapters in the book, and I'm going to, if I can, in 30 minutes, précis it and deliver it to you, hopefully in a palatable way, which you'll be able to understand, as long as you understand any of the English words which I'm using. I hope you can. I know it's not an American English, it's an English, and I know that's different, but please, if you don't understand anything, then let me know. If I asked each one of you here, I'm not going to do it because we haven't got the time, but if we had more time, I would. What is Chassidus? What is it? What would you answer? So some people would say, well, it's Jewish mysticism packaged in a way that the average intellect today could understand. So if we wanted to digest godliness, what is God? We'd be able to have some integration by learning Chassidus today. That's possibly one answer. Another answer is, historically, the Hasidic movement began with the Baal Shem Tov. And in the days of the Baal Shem Tov, the Jewish people were economically, spiritually, in a state of faint. They were depressed. There was a great schism between the intelligentsia and the pejorative Amei Haaretz, the ignorant masses.
It was in Europe.
In Europe?
Because the other side wasn't.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. By the Ashkenazim.
I can't say, I mean, it's all Jewish,
Yeah. Okay, we won't go there. There's no politics today. So Hashem placed into this world this magnificent soul of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov revived the masses. And there's a beautiful parable which is brought of a king who had a son, a prince, who this prince became deathly ill. And the king called all his physicians and tried to find some elixir to revive the son, but there was nothing available. And finally, one doctor came up and he came up with the idea that if you take the crown jewel in the Keser HaMelech, in the crown of the king, and you grind it and mix it into water and put drops on the lips of the prince, it will revive the prince. And that is exactly in the analog what Chassidus is. The Baal Shem Tov took the very essence and ground it up into nuggets which are digested and can revive. Chabad came along 2 generations later and brought it further down. It wasn't just fiery, passionate, veritalach, words which inspired, but the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, and I think I'm here because you finished learning the Tanya, took the teachings of Chassidus and he applied them within the average intellect, so that each one of us, and none of us here, myself included, are giants of intellect. We're not in this generation of that caliber. We're average people, and yet what was done in this generation was to take the deepest esoteric teachings and place them fair and square within 2022, the Facebook, TikTok generation. A magnificent feat. So what I'm going to do now is to take this beautiful talk of the Rebbe, which he delivered in 1966, and I'm going to, if I can, deliver it to you on your plate. So the Rebbe says like this: Chassidus achieved many things. It revived the masses. It delivered, as I said before, an esoteric Judaism within the intellect. But everything that it achieved stems from one central idea. What is that idea? So he says, let's extrapolate backwards. Mischara neida muhusa. From the reward of something, you will know the essence of it. When the Baal Shem Tov, one Rosh Hashanah, had an aliyat hanashama, had an elevation of soul, he entered into the heavenly palace of Mashiach, and he asked Mashiach, when are you coming? Mashiach took a verse in Proverbs, and he said, when the well springs of your teachings are brought outwards, are widely disseminated. So from that statement, we can understand that the reward of the teachings of Chassidus is the coming of Mashiach. Let's have a look at the correlation between the two. Why is that the reward of teaching Chassidus? Let's have a look, therefore, at the personality of Mashiach. There's a beautiful teaching of the sages. They say as follows: there are many levels in the soul. The soul is not just one level. In the Zohar, it says there's a level in the soul called the nefesh. a level in the soul called the ruach, a level called neshama, and a level called neshama of the neshama. This is what the Zohar says. If you have a look in the Midrash actually details and delineates that fourth level into two levels. It says the soul of the soul, it says one level is called chaya, and the fifth and highest level is called yechida. So we have what we would call naran chai, nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida. Now, most people aren't called Archibald, Nicholas, Daniel, Sam, Bob. You don't need 5 names for one person. Why does the soul have 5 different names? The answer is, it's not the same name for the one soul. These are names at different levels in the soul. Now, since we are created in the image of God, the soul also is reflected within the psyche of the human being. The nefesh is in the blood. The ruach is expressed in the emotions. The neshama is expressed in the intellect. Chaya is expressed by the soul powers of willpower and pleasure. And the highest level, yechida, is extremely difficult to translate. In Yiddish, we would call it der Pintel Yid. In English, we'd call it the quintessential point of the soul. Simply put, it's the essence. An essence that transcends any siur, any configuration. So the nefesh is in the blood. We can talk about a certain part of the soul. The emotions, we can talk about a certain dimension of the soul, how it manifests in emotions, and same in intellect, same in willpower, same in the power of pleasure. But the essence is an undivided, singular essence that is like oil. The ladies will know here, when you bake a cake, you have to put oil in, right? Oil has a fantastic property. On the one hand, the oil rises to a top of any other liquid which you put it in. It actually remains quite separate than any other than the other part of the liquid. But on the same time, it's mefafea bekula. The oil takes the ingredients right throughout the cake. So there's a paradox in this oil. On the one hand, it's transcendent. On the other hand, it's completely permeates everything else inside the cake. The same is true of the essence. The yechida is not a separate part of the soul. It's the essence of each one of them. Let me tell you a little story just to illustrate it. There's a rabbi in America called Rabbi Shem Tov, and he works inside the White House sometimes. So one of the people in the White House, a non-Jew, came over to him and said, Rabbi Shem Tov, I've heard that there are Reform Jews, and there's conservative Jews, and there's Orthodox. So Rabbi Shem Tov very famously said, Chabad is the Orthodox Jew within every Reform Jew, the Orthodox Jew within every conservative Jew, and the Orthodox Jew within every Orthodox Jew. Chabad is not an affiliation to an organization or building. Thank you so much. Chabad represents the yechida. It's the essence. Those are the teachings of Chassidus. And therefore, they bring chayas, life force, energy, to every other area of Torah. Now, everything in the world comes through Torah. Bishvil ha-Torah nibra olam. Through the path of the Torah, the world was created. Torah is the blueprint of creation. Torah is the place that the Zohar says that God looked into the Torah and created the world. It's the architect plans. What does that mean, God looked into the Torah? What is Torah? In Tanya, which you have learned, Torah is defined as Chochmasoi Yisbarach, God's divine wisdom. God looked into his wisdom and created the world. So therefore, everything originates in that wisdom. And now let's go for a walk in the orchard of that wisdom. Because as godly wisdom that transcends the world cascades down into the world, as you have learned in Tanya, like a waterfall which comes down, there are various levels in the Torah, and they are called paradise. Pshat, the simple level. Remez, the level of what the Torah alludes to. Daled, drush, the homiletic interpretation. And finally, samach, soid, the mystical interpretation. Those four levels of Torah interpretation correspond to the four worlds. Pshat is in the world of Asiya. Remez is in the world of Yetzirah. Drush is in the world of Beria. And Soid, and esoteric wisdom, is in the world of Atzilus. They correspond also to the four levels of the soul. Pshat is the soul level of Nefesh. Remez, the soul level of Ruach. Drush, Neshama. Chaya is in Atzilus. And what is Yechida? So in Kabbalistic terminology, we would call it the crown. It's above the body. In specific language, we'd call it Attic. It's right at the top. If you've ever heard Zemiros in a Chabad house on Shabbos, you might have heard the term Attic Yomin. Okay? It's the attic, it's the top part. It's the highest level in the soul. Now, that has an impact on all the various levels. And I'm going to take you now on a journey of interpreting one idea in Torah on the four levels of Torah. I'll then give you the fifth level of interpretation and highlight how the fifth level illuminates all the previous four levels. Okay? That's where we're going. By the way, none of what I'm saying is mine. This is all inside this talk of the Rebbe. And I said it's one of the chapters, one of my favorite chapters in the book. So I hope I'll be able to give it over in a way which everybody will be understand. As soon as we wake up in the morning, miyad keshenir mishenosei, as soon as a person wakes up in the morning, we say, Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Shehachazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatech. Now, we need to wash our hands in the morning, netilat yadayim. Many Orthodox Jews place a bowl with a cup by their beds so they won't even get out of bed before washing their hands. They don't even take steps before washing by their bed. That's called netilat yadayim. However, we say the modeh ani before we even wash our hands. Why? Historically, in Talmudic times, they actually used to say a blessing when they would get up. This is called the blessing of Elokai Neshama, which we actually do say later on in the brachot. Today, we don't do that. We actually first take a shower. You do what you need to do in the morning, brush your teeth, and then you'll say your morning blessings. But right as soon as we wake up, we say modeh ani. So now I'm going to give you the paradise, the four levels of modeh ani. Learning modeh ani in pshat, simple. Learning it in remez, what it hints to. Learning it in drush, in the homiletic interpretation. Learning it in sod, in the esoteric. Then we will learn how Chassidut explains the modeh ani, and I will illuminate each one of the four levels with the interpretation of Chassidut. So you'll get a Vorspeise. What do they call it? We're going to eat soon, an hors d'oeuvre, right? You'll get a spiritual hors d'oeuvre before we go and have supper. The simple meaning, the pshat in Modeh Ani is, you all know, before you eat something, we say a blessing. When we benefit from this world, we say a blessing. When we give thanks to Hashem, this is called birchat hoda'ah, we give thanks to Hashem for something which we have experienced, which we're delighted with. So, fundamentally, when we wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is to thank God for giving me life back. After all, I don't want to be morbid, but not everybody wakes up in the morning. And so the very fact that life itself has been returned, for that immediately we should say a blessing. I have a good friend who passed away in the middle of the night from whatever, but he didn't get up the next morning. And when that happened, it had a tremendous impact on me to think, when I say Modeh Ani, that, not everybody gets up the next morning. And thank God I did this morning. So Modeh Ani lefanach. Simple. That's the pshat. The remes, what does it hint to? So it's brought an interpretation. It hints to the concept of the resurrection of the dead. Sleep, says the Talmud, is 1/60th of death. When we die, the body goes to the grave, the soul goes back to heaven. However, Judaism believes one of the fundamental tenets of faith is that 40 years after the coming of Mashiach will be the resurrection of the dead. If you want to see all the details about the resurrection, I also wrote a book about that called To Live and Live Again. It's printed by Chassidus in English. Very fascinating subject. What's even more fascinating is why Judaism insists on that being a fundamental of faith. It's an interesting question. What would be if we had a Judaism without a belief in the resurrection of the dead? Why does Maimonides consider it as a fundamental of faith? Different lecture, different topic. But nevertheless, when we say Modeh Ani lefanacha, just like now I have gotten up after experiencing a 60th of death, so too in the time to come, when we'll die, the body disintegrates, but the Midrash says that one tiny bone in the body will not disintegrate. It's called the luz bone. Some people identify it with the coccyx at the base of the spine. And it says that doesn't disintegrate, and from there will be rebuild the body. Sounds like science fiction, but not today. You can take the DNA from it and recreate a body. Today we can already scientifically even see a window of how that's possible. That is the Remes interpretation of Modeh Ani. The drush interpretation of Modeh Ani is the following. You don't own your life. You were given it as a deposit. You were lent your life. Hashem natan, Hashem lakach. God gives, and he'll take away when the time comes. So your rental car, you've got to take care of. You can't crash it up like your own banger, right? You've got to take care of your body, your soul, because it's a deposit. And when the time comes to take the deposit back, Hashem will take it back. So just like you were given your deposit back, so too it says the remez is that if somebody has lent you money and you've taken a deposit, you should give that deposit back. You shouldn't withhold it when the time comes to give it back. This is how the drush learns. Finally, the soid. If you have a look, I'm not sure how au fait everybody here is with the language of Kabbalah, so I'll just use Kabbalistic words, those who understand good and those who don't. But in Kabbalah, it says the following. It says, when we say the words chai v'kayam, it refers to the sephirot of Malchut and Yesod. Malchut is the sephirah from which it's called the mouth of God, from which emanates the words of creation. Malchut peh, Malchut is the mouth, from which God speaks. Speech is a metaphor for divine contraction of the infinite into the finite, as you've learned in Tanya. And Higher than Malchut is the Sephira of Yesod. In the human paradigm, those are the reproductive organs which give over and create. So when we say Chai v'Kayam, says in Kabbalah, that means it's the yichud, it's the unity of the Sephira of Yesod and Malchut. That's what it says. So I've now explained to you Modeh Ani in Paradise, an interpretation in Pshat, in Remez, in Drush, and in Sod. And the truth is, every letter of Torah can be seen on one of those four levels. So Torah is multi-dimensional. In fact, the Torah that you learn down here in this world, you will relearn it in the nether world. Not the Netherlands, the nether world, okay? What does that mean? How do you learn Torah? Well, think about it. When you die, yeah, you're not going to have coffee the next morning. You're not going to play golf or tennis. I come from Wimbledon, right? You're not going to do any of that. So what are you going to do? And what is your frame of reference? So the Talmud talks of what we call Mesivta Derakia, heavenly academies. If you learn Torah down here, you'll learn it up there. But if there's no coffee and cake, if there's no hamotzi roll, what exactly are we going to learn? Well, the answer is you'll learn the Torah as it cascaded down here into this world. You'll simply learn it on a higher level. You can learn it on the highest levels until it applies all in the Sifirot. So you might read down here a story about Abraham and Sarah, and they were physical people down here, but over there, you'll learn it on a completely higher, multi-dimensional level, which, by the way, you can have a glimpse of all that nowadays. And it's absolutely fascinating to go on such a walk through this orchard, because you see the Torah as not just single dimensional, but multi-dimensional, and you understand that even an obscure halacha, an obscure idea, things which you think you read in the Chumash and you think, that's antiquated, doesn't make sense. You know, why is the Torah talking about that? I'll give you an example. In one of the parashas, the Torah speaks of the 7 kings who ruled in the land of Edom and who passed away. Do you really need to know what the names of the 7 kings of Edom were? However, the Arizal interprets that as an entire anatomical discussion of the world of Tohu, of the world of chaos before the reconstruction in this world. Now, you may not be familiar with that specific topic. However, what I'm highlighting, how long do I have, Shmuel? 5 minutes? 3 minutes, okay.
We will hear more soon, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. However, what that means is that it's truly a multi-dimensional study, which is very, very beautiful indeed. Now, let me now deliver you the 5th level, the 5th interpretation, the interpretation of Chassidus in Modeh Ani, and highlight to you how that invigorates all the other levels. So this is a very personal teaching, because the teaching which I'm sharing with you now is taken from a book called Hayom Yom. Hayom Yom is a diary which the Rebbe wrote in 1942, 1943. And it's a brilliant work, because in that work, there's an aphorism for every single day. Short, fiery, brilliant, uplifting, and inspiring aphorism. You can get the book. It's available, printed a number of times. I personally read it every single day before davening. It gives me my caffeine shot together with the coffee. So I'm born on the 11th day of Shvat. That's my birthday. the entry for the in Hayom Yom of the 11th day of Shvat is a teaching about Modeh Ani. And it goes like this. And as I said, it's very personal to me because it's my birthday. The Rebbe teaches like this. We say Modeh Ani in the morning before we wash our hands. Why? So he says, because what's the reason why we wash our hands? Because there's some residue impurity on the hands when we sleep. Sleep, as I said to you before, and is a 6th year of death. And therefore, when a person wakes up in the morning, there's some residue impurity on the hands. And consequently, we need to wash that off. So the Rebbe says beautifully. So why do we say the Modeh Ani before we wash our hands? How can you possibly say Modeh Ani in a state of impurity? So he answers, because no impurity in the world can defile the Modeh Ani of a Jew. The Modeh Ani of a Jew remains complete above and beyond any form of defilement. And I want to tell you, just hearing that is completely inspirational. Because, you think of Freudian psychology, you think of the id. Chassidus went deeper, not to the id, but to the yid. And it went one step further, and it says, no, there is a core which no impurity can defile. That is the teaching of Chassidus. And now, very, very briefly, I will tell you how it illuminates each one of the other 4 levels, or perhaps I should stop here and you can read it in the book. Your call.
Just do it quick.
Just do it quick. Okay. Gosh, it took me 5 years to write. She says, just do it quick. But the Rebbe says, this is what you have to do, right?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Thank you for your explanation of your own interpretation. But my question is, who decides finally what's the best interpretation?
The beauty of Torah is there's no definitive one. And you know something, the most important thing is to take what speaks to you. You have to take what speaks to you. I'll tell you something. What's your name? What's your name? Moshe. There's a beautiful saying in the Shema. It says, "V'hayu hadvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavcha hayom." These words which are commanding you today should be, who knows the next words? Al levavecha. Who said that? Oh, Rebbetzin Boss. Very good. I'm glad to know you know the Shema by now. What does the word al mean? On, al, go on the clouds, right? So let me ask you, should the words be on your heart or in your heart? The answer is not everything, Moshe, that I've said will go in, but put it on the heart, and whatever goes in for you is the one you need to take in. That's the answer to your question. So very briefly, very, very briefly, the way that the Hasidic interpretation of Modeh Ani highlights each one of the others. And it says, Modeh Ani Levanei, yeah, thank God I woke up in the morning. But I woke up in the morning, ayid. I woke up in the morning not to immerse myself in the quagmire of vanity, of lust, desire, of the alma de shikra, the fake world in which we live in. I have my soul returned for a purpose. My soul came down here for a purpose. It's a purposeful descent. That's a different type of moda'ani. That's illuminated by that pristine part of the soul that cannot be defiled by any impurity in the world. I'll share with you an unbelievable teaching. I'm running you late, but I'll show you a teaching that's unbelievable. The Baal Shem Tov had a student called Reb Mordechai. Reb Mordechai heard from the Baal Shem Tov a teaching that a soul can descend to this world and live for 70 or 80 years just to do another person a favor. Whether it be in the material or in the spiritual. I was once by a Fabrengen of the Rebbe. I merited to be by a Fabrengen of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was sitting there with 5,000-6,000 Chassidim. It was electric. And the Rebbe quoted this teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. Mordechai, he said, the Talmud, the students of the Baal Shem Tov said, that a soul can descend to this world and live for 70 to 80 years just to do another person a favor, be it either in the material or the spiritual. And then the Rebbe posed a question, and he said, and how do you know which favor that is? And I recall standing there, an 18-year-old, standing there thinking, what a gewaltige question. What an unbelievable question. How do you know? How do you find out? What is that favor? And the Rebbe said, and the answer is, and I thought in that split second, there cannot be an answer to this question. How do you know which one it is? And the Rebbe said, the answer is, and I was yearning to hear the answer. The Rebbe said, the answer is, you don't know. And therefore, treat every favor as if that's the reason why your soul came down to this world.
Once you do it, then you're obsolete, right?
But you don't know which one it is.
Okay, so you can sit on a mountain your whole life.
No. You don't know which one it is. You don't know which one it is. This is, in general, you have a shlichut of Torah mitzvot. But I brought this story to illuminate to you that when you say modeh ani, it's not just about, oh, thank God, wow, another day. Gosh, let me do everything I was doing yesterday with no change. The idea is that, thank God, I got back a soul, and this soul has a meaning today. It has a purpose. It's a moment of growth. It's a moment to do somebody a favor. It's a moment to make a difference. It's a moment to make an impact. It's a moment to grow. Ladies and gentlemen, I've gone past my time. If you want to hear all the rest of the stuff, just read the book.
Thank you.